Hello, Sports Idol Volleyball. Our game is changing. There is no question that today our game is evolving into lots of different techniques, different systems. We're training differently, and the most obvious is the change in our rules. What's not changing is the effectiveness of the slide. So middles, pay attention. Studies are showing that at the elite and college level, the effectiveness of the slide is between 45 and 60%. That means that more than half of your slides are producing points. At what we would call the amateur level, which would be high school or club, the efficiency of the slide goes down a bit to like 30 or 40%. But my guess is it's because we don't run it very well. Why don't we run it very well? I bet we're not being taught very well. There's a lot of coaches that may not know how to teach the slide effectively. And between the low efficiency percentage and not really knowing how to run it well is making players not really want to learn how to run it. If you want to increase your efficiency as a middle and get your percentage higher, learn to run a slide. As a Division I middle myself, I ran a lot of slides. And I get questions today from young athletes and families all the time about how to make it run well. One of those questions is, what do I love about the slide? The slide, in my opinion, is the most athletic offensive play in the game. It's a very natural running motion. It is super fast. The ball is not only traveling fast, but it's traveling horizontally to the net, which makes it really difficult to block. I love that it's one of the only plays in the game, the only sets that requires you to run and jump off of one leg. I even love that it's not utilized as much in the men's game, so it's pretty exclusive to the women's game and makes it very unique. I love that if you run it correctly and if you run it properly, it can produce multiple outcomes. You can tool off the block, you can hit the very tight window right down the line. If your positioning is right and your foot is planted in the right place in relationship to the ball, you can cut it inside the block, you can cut it around the block, you can hit it faster than the block actually forms, and it produces a lot of point options for you. I love how natural and smooth the attack approach footsteps are. I know when I was being tested for jump touch, I would actually touch higher off of one leg off my slide approach than I would off of 2 feet. Another question I get from players and families all the time is, what makes it so hard? I think the answer to that actually ties into why I love it so much. I love it because it's hard. What's hard about it? Again, it's a very, very fast set that goes horizontally to the net. So when you're running it efficiently, the attacker will plant her foot, drive up into the air, and she's actually drifting a little bit. So not only is the ball mobile, but the player is also mobile when she hits it. It's also hard because it's an attack that is run behind the setter. And not only is the ball behind the setter, she has to set where she can't see, but the hitter, when the middle's running it, the ball is coming from behind her also. So it crosses her non-hitting shoulder and has to get into the perfect window in order for you to attack it right in the right spot. It requires very good timing on two positions, not just the hitter's timing, but the setter's timing also. One thing that I think is hard for amateur middles, not necessarily elite or college level middles, but young middles, is trying to get your body coordinated enough to run your approach and make your arms do a natural motion so that you can attack it fast. If you're not terribly coordinated, this can make the hit feel really awkward and also produce a very awkward hit. Now I have a few clips of some videos to show you, so let's go through those and judge some slides. Now this middle number 12 is going for her slide, and she actually does a really tricky thing, which I love about this approach. She goes around the libero because the libero came up to dig this short pass. The middle went around her because she had to. That's very good navigating. But then as she starts to take her approach, she has to slow down right there, going into her last two steps, which is the time that you don't want to slow down. You want to speed up those last two steps. She actually slows down those last two steps, which means that she hit a pretty good slide. She caught up to it, but it could have been better if she was going all in one motion. Now this middle, number 17, she's doing a good job getting lined up with the setter. So right there, when the ball comes into the setter's hands, she's on her left foot ready to go. So that is good. However, off that left foot, she's not driving and taking a big enough step. So she takes small steps and then has to take a giant step to get to where the set actually is. and it causes her right leg to come out really wide. So again, that's a pretty good attack, and it worked out because the blocker was late, but it could have been a stronger attack had she taken a much bigger, more powerful first step going into her last 2 steps. And here is that same hitter doing the exact same thing, her small steps, and then having to really reach to go get that ball. That ball's very outside of her hitting shoulder. It causes her to land off balance. And you want to be very careful when you're taking off like that, because if you're taking off balance and you land off balance, there's a good chance that you might tweak your knee in some way. Okay, this middle number 1, the first thing I notice about her, she is really deep off the 10-foot line. She's probably at almost 20 feet, which is a very, very long approach. That would be more of a elite level, professional, college level distance for her to get. So good on her for that. She goes a little bit early before the setter actually has the ball in her hands, and she's going 1 speed. So the drive to the ball is good, and her spacing is actually very good also off the net. So the finish ends up being pretty good, but I think it could have been better had she sped up those last 2 steps and not gone 1 speed. And this high school club middle looks like it's going to be a really good example because of the camera angle of spacing. What should the middle's spacing be in relationship to the ball? Another thing I notice about this particular clip is that the setter actually comes off the net. She's standing at about 5 or 6 feet off the net. So the middle is behind the 10-foot line, which is where she should be. The middle's on time, but running a very deep slide. So the setter's actually setting it really far off the net there. It's a good set. I love that the middle's arm comes back and her knee, her right leg is pulled up pretty high. She's getting really explosive movements up to that ball, which is great. Lines her shoulder up and finishes that attack. But again, the thing that it's impressive is how far off the setter was from the net when she set it and how far the middle adjusted to stay off the net as well. It's very common for young middles to just run to the net. And with a setter that comes off the net that far, you tend to get caught underneath the ball, like you overrun it. And we don't want to overrun it. You want to stay behind it for sure. This high school middle number 4 in the red jersey looks like she has a little bit of an advantage. She looks about 6'4" maybe. So height can definitely play a part in how successful you are, but it's definitely not required for you to be super tall to run the slide. You just have to be really fast. And what I like about what she's doing is that she is really exploding up to that ball off the ground really quickly, and she's attacking the ball as part of her approach. So that sound gap between when she leaves the ground and hits the ball is really close together, and that makes it so that any block, even if they're a big block, is going to get caught on their way up. You're going to hit it before the block forms. The other thing that I see about this block is that right when she hits it, the block is still trying to get there. So there's a big drift on the outside blocker's part. And again, if you jump and swing early enough, there's going to be a really big window down the line for you to hit that, which means that if your shoulder is lined up with the ball properly and you're in a good relationship with that set, you're going to crush it down the line. Okay, this clip, it looks like we're watching a player rep out. She's at a lesson of some kind, and she's repping out, learning how to get better timing and a better alignment with her shoulder on that slide. But what stands out to me is that even though she gets it at the end, it's a pretty good slide, certainly better than the ones that she attacked before. She's still taking a million too many footsteps. On a really good slide, you really only need 3. Left, right, left. Yeah, way too many steps there. Somebody get that kid a tutu. Okay, here's some college level slides. Now here's another point that I want to bring up, and again, this utilizes the Louisville clip, but now we're kind of watching from the side, so it gives you a better perspective of off the net and off the court, and they're practicing where they plant their foot. Now it looks like their system is that the slide goes all the way to the antenna, and they want their middles to plant their foot about 3 feet or so, maybe 2 or 3 feet off of the sideline, inside the sideline. And that's where they want to plant their foot to make sure that they're in the right spot. And if you plant your foot inside, which this girl does, plants her foot way too far inside and ends up having to drift. Now watching this clip, it looks like she's drifting because the set went really wide also. So where you plant your foot is very dependent on where the ball actually comes down. If the ball comes down inside the antenna, you want to plant your foot where the ball is going to be and drive up to it. If you plant your foot too far inside of the ball, you end up drifting. If you plant your foot too far outside the ball, you end up reaching in to get that ball. So while some programs want you to plant your foot in a specific location on the court, I think while that's true in most cases at the elite level, it's also true that you should plant your foot wherever the ball is coming down. So your relationship to the ball is more important than where your foot is on the court, especially when you're training a setter. Here's a clip of Nebraska, and I like this clip because there's multiple middles being shown here in this clip, and middles will run slides differently, naturally, which they kind of should. So this showcases how different middles can look different running their slide, but they are very effective, even in their differences. But some things are the same. Let's see if we can tell what the same things are. The same things are they're accelerating into their last two steps. Their sound gap looks very similar. And one thing on this last one here, it looks like number 15, that's Addie Jackson. It looks like she's leaning back just a little bit. She's going fast, but she's driving so hard toward the pole that the ball actually looks like it's really close to her when she hits it. And while it's a hard swing, she's having to go backwards a little bit, pushing her hips forward and leaning back so that she doesn't run into the net. Now the difference in this Nebraska clip is that number 15 is being set really, really wide, and that's probably on purpose. And it looks like here, number 5, her set dies inside just a little bit, which again could also be on purpose, but she has to take a shorter approach, shorter steps so that her shoulders lined up. And she just rips that ball in between the seam. Now I like this slow-mo version because it really demonstrates and allows you to see the timing as the ball is traveling. Now this is a really high set. I don't know that I would run my slides that high, but she executes pretty good. Because it's so high, it's going pretty far. It's continuing to travel. So where she plants her foot, right there. She plants her foot, the ball is still inside of her, but by the time it travels and comes down, it's going to drop right onto her shoulder, her hitting arm. And she's got a nice explosive movement from her left leg, good draw from her right knee, and her elbows nice and open. Now, the only thing that I can see in this technical approach, from a technical perspective, I think it could be a little bit more natural because if you're watching her elbow right here, her arm comes out to the side and then she pulls her elbow back versus what an elite middle will do is take that natural running motion and throw that arm back this way so that she can continue her swing. But again, really nice sound gap timing. She's hitting it before she starts to come down. While the hitter did do a really good job picking this shot, this number 14 off-blocker defender is clearly not ready, which I guess is kind of the purpose of the slide, to catch the defense when they're not ready. This is Louisville, and clearly they are very good at running their slides. And here's some examples of what it looks like to actually get everything in sync and run a really effective slide. Now we're watching this in slow-mo. Again, her timing is excellent. She's on her left step as the ball is coming into the setter's hands. So regardless of what the setter does, you are on your left step, ready to drive forward. Not just standing there, but actually propelling some weight off of that left step so that when the setter releases it, you can explode into your right left. Now what I'm watching this Louisville player do that's really well is she is running, her strides and her arms are doing what they naturally should be doing. The running motion is that when the left leg comes forward, your right arm is forward. And when your right leg comes forward, your right arm goes backwards. And she's letting her arm do that. So it's a very natural run. Her arm goes backwards as she plants her left foot, drives that right knee up, and swings from behind her. Look how low her hand is. It's nice and loose, and her elbow is just ready to whip. She's got a great relationship with the ball. It's lined up with her shoulder. And again, with that really good sound gap, as soon as she plants her feet, she's starting her swing. It's all connected in one beautiful motion. And she utilizes all of her core also. She's piking, she's twisting, and hitting that ball hard. Well done, Louisville. Again, one of the reasons that I like the slide so much is that it's very unique to the women's game. It's been utilized more often in the women's game than it is in the men's game, but I did find some clips of some men's teams utilizing the slide. Again, this is a very athletic play. Number one is already behind the setter when he sets the ball. He only needs one more step to catch up to that. So he jumps up, his arm is ready. He's jumping a little bit sideways. He's kind of leaning to the side a little bit. My suspicion is that he's a little bit tight to the net. But again, his drifting motion, he's going so hard and so fast that he's actually hitting it laterally. He's jumping laterally and he's hitting it on his way outside. Again, great stride, great arm swing, great elevation. He's in position to cut that ball inside, which he does. But if you watch this landing when he comes down, whoa, right there. That is an ACL waiting to go. Please be careful when you're coming down to land on two if possible. It looks like this player is in high school, maybe a club tournament. And again, she has a really good approach. She's on time. But what I want to point out that's very, very important for middles to note if you're going to be fluid and efficient at this slide and hit it with maximum power is you need to bring your arm back. She's not bringing her arm back very well. And if you watch her hitting arm, her right arm, both elbows go back. She plants and she front swings. And then her elbow goes right next to her head. Her hand and her elbow are at a very wide angle, so she's not going to be able to get a whole lot of whip on this ball. And again, the timing is good. Her alignment is really good right there. That ball is right in line with her shoulder. She looks very balanced, but I just think that she could have hit it harder. And if you watch her landing, she's jumping forward toward the net, and she lands on the center line, which you don't want to do. But this is a really good example of what a typical young middle looks like. Another question I often get from young middles and families is, what are you looking at? What are you watching to make sure that you're hitting a slide well? I remember when I was hitting slides, the one thing that I would look at the longest is the ball. The ball is your cue. It will tell you where to go, when to go. It is your cue for timing. It is your cue for how fast and definitely what spacing you should be in. If you're watching the ball off the passer's platform and traveling up towards you, by the time you see it come past you, that's when you change your eyes to kind of look toward the setter, not at the setter, but kind of in the general area. You want the whole picture to come into a frame. And when you see that ball come down into the setter's hands, that's your cue to load your first step and start running. Once I'm in that good running posture and my left foot is planted and ready to go forward, I'm watching the ball get released. So my eyes stay on the ball for a really long time. When the block comes into the picture, it's in your peripheral vision. You can see where the hands are in your peripheral, but you're not looking at the block. Because if you take your eyes off the ball and look at the blocker, you lose the ball. Another thing that an inexperienced middle will look at is because your coach is telling you to watch the pass and then look at the setter, you look at the pass really early on, and then as soon as you know that the ball's been passed, you turn your head and look at the setter, but you've lost sight of where the ball is traveling. So then you have to arrange yourself to the setter, but if the setter is zigzagging all over the place and she's trying to get into a position also, that can be very confusing for a middle, and it can cause you to stop running your slide because you're not really sure where to go. Whereas if you watch the ball for a lot longer, you can situate yourself based on where the pass is going, because guess what? The setter is going to come to the ball. So arrange yourself to the pass and get where you need to be ahead of when the setter gets there. That way you don't run into her. To wrap up, here are my 4 cues that I would use to hit a slide better. First, vision. What are you looking at? How long are you watching it? The ball will tell you. Second is making sure that you're in a ready posture and ready to go. If you're in a stop position and then the set happens and you have to chase it, you may have to start speeding up again. Whereas if you're kind of already starting to go, that's more ready. Try to better coordinate your natural running motion. Go test it out. Go for a run. What is your right arm doing when your left leg is going forward? And what is it doing when your right leg comes forward? Typically, again, the natural running motion says that if your right leg is coming forward, your right arm is going backwards. Let it go backwards. And last is create that sound gap. As soon as you plant your left step and start driving up, you got to hit it. Your arm should already be in motion. If your step and your swing are connected, then you're going to hit it faster than the block can actually get up. I hope this was helpful for some of you middles. Happy slide attacking. This has been Sports Idol Nation. Sports is in our DNA. We hope it's in yours too.